right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. Think of this as your post-Oscar palate cleanser. This is something fresh and different and fun, and I think we all need that right now. So Mary Stanford is a professional theater historian. She's a professional singer. She's a close friend and collaborator on many of these episodes. Even if she's not on camera, believe me, she's helping me behind the scenes. She suggested this Hello Dolly episode. And to be honest, I do not have her theater knowledge. And I was a little like, eh. And then she invited
you were
me.
a lot like,
yeah, I was.
But I persevered.
You persevered. She invited me over to her apartment and she said, just come over and make the Hello Dolly cookie with me. And I said, okay, I'll keep an open mind. I ate one and then I ate 5. And then I said, you know what, we're going to do this. So here we are.
Here we are. Actually, said you texted me and said that you had some for breakfast the next day, and I didn't regret it at all.
0 regrets. So also joining me are frequent Hollywood Kitchen guests, film historian and Marion Davies biographer, Lara Gabriel, and entertainment journalist, Danny Miller. So thank you guys so much. We are going to talk about all of the amazing actresses who have played the character of Dolly Levi on stage, on screen. We're going to talk about Carol Channing, Barbara Streisand, Mary Martin, Ethel Merman, Pearl Bailey, Ginger Redd. There's a long list here, but we're going to talk about a lot of them.
I've got the whole list.
Read the list.
This isn't even an extensive list. This is just some of the women, just to give you an idea. So as you said, there's Carol Cook, there's Martha Ray, Betty Grable, Dorothy Lamour, Eve Arden, Ann Miller, Yvonne DiCarlo, Phyllis Diller, of all people, Phyllis Diller, and most recently, we've got Bette Midler, Bernadette Peters, and Betty Buckley, who we were actually talking about before we went live on this. It is one of those roles that if you are a musical theater actress over the age of 50, like it's one of your dream roles, probably. It's that or Mama Rose, maybe even both of them. And it's so much fun to be able to just pay tribute to the show, but also to all of these women who took this role and made it their own.
Absolutely. So the recipe today comes from a book from 1960. It's called The Beautiful Wives Cookbook, Glittering Recipes from Celebrity Kitchen. And it's about 1960. And it says in here, Hello Dolly cookies. This recipe was presented to Carol Channing when she played in Little Rock, Arkansas in Hello Dolly. The Little Rock Cooking Club, I love that, made a basket of Hello Dolly cookies for Miss Channing and gave her permission to use this recipe. So this is where we're getting the recipe from. So it's basically like a layer bar cookie, and we're going to go ahead and make it right now and get that part kind of.
It's very, very difficult. That's why we're going to have to make it right now to, so that you know what to do.
Right. Yes. I'm trying to just get the.
I'm joking because it's not. It's very simple. I think, Carrie, how long did it take you to put this together while I told you what to do?
I think 5 minutes, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. Time us. Find out. Okay.
I like simple things. Okay. First off, melt a stick of. It says oleo, but we're using
so that's margarine. Margarine for those who are playing along at home.
Okay, so put it in the pan. All right, so we are using about an 8x8 brownie pan for our purposes today here.
And are you happy? So the original recipe calls for 9x12. So we're using a much smaller pan here, Carrie. Are you halving the recipe for this?
No, I'm just doing it right
okay.
The book.
So that's okay. Is that what you did?
That's what I did last night.
Perfect. It turned out great. Okay. So use the brownie pan instead of the suggested 9x12. Okay.
Okay. Now we're going to pour 1 cup of graham cracker crumbs over this spread. So I kind of pureed the heck out of these graham cracker crumbs. So they are very crumbly, but we're going to spread them out amongst all of this butter here. All right. So the butter is going to soak up the graham cracker crumbs and make this nice little base for it. Okay, so this is what it looks like so far. Okay, now pour 1 cup of coconut over and spread. So here's 1 cup. Mary recommended using unsweetened coconut because if you use sweetened, it just kind of amps up the sweetness already.
It's very
already
sweet to begin with.
Okay, so I'm pour the coconut. Okay, I'm gonna spread it out all over the place here.
It's so hard so far.
Yeah, right. Okay, they're spreading out the coconut. Okay, now pour 1 package of chocolate chips over and spread. I use about 1 cup, and I found last night that that worked out pretty well. So, because once it melts, it melts. Okay, so I'm gonna pour 1 cup of the chocolate chips over the coconut, graham crackers, and butter. See, that's a good amount, I think.
Yeah, and you can use any kind of chocolate chips that you happen to have or like. I've made this before with, classic semi-sweet, but I've also done it with milk chocolate. It's delicious, really whatever floats your boat.
And you can use butterscotch, you can use peanut butter, you can add that to the chocolate. You can do a lot with this recipe. Okay, so now it says pour 1 cup of nuts over this and spread. I got some walnuts and kind of pureed them into
Oh, you
almost
pureed
powder.
them. Oh,
I
that's
didn't mean
interesting.
to, it just kind of happened that way.
No, it's an interesting experiment. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes them a little easier to spread. I just didn't realize my blender would
Right.
puree them on this level.
But again, it's one of those recipes that you can just have fun with and do whatever you want. So use any kind of nuts that you think sound good.
It's really hard to screw this up, and believe me, if something can get screwed up, I will screw it up. So this one is pretty foolproof, which is a good thing. Okay, so put the nuts here. All right, now pour 1 can of Eagle brand condensed milk over it. Well, this isn't Eagle brand, but whatever, it's condensed milk. All right.
And I like to drizzle mine over, and it makes like a pretty pattern, but it doesn't really matter because it's all gonna just sort of melt together once you put it in the oven anyway. So that's just my OCD.
All right, well, stuff is nice and thick and gooey. I'm gonna take a spoon here and scrape the rest of it out. And basically that is it. It is no more complicated than this. This is it. So we put this in the oven at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. And I'm gonna set this aside and I will show you what the final product looks like. Here's what it looks like. So very pretty. Mary advised me to make sure that they are fully cooled before you start to cut them. But they're gooey, they're thick, they're a very layered kind of bar here, as you can see. And they're great. They're very delicious. So
I'm smelling them.
I know my
Can we
whole.
taste them?
Yes, we
Do we get to
can.
taste
Yes,
them?
we get to taste them.
Okay, while she's getting a knife to cut this, I will say that in my experience, when you're cooking these, when you get to that, the 20, 25-minute mark, start to watch that oven really, really closely, because it goes from being cooked to being burned in a nanosecond, like when that time hits.
And I did have a few of my edges get a little bit.
Just because there's so much sugar in it, and that sugary part burns. So
Okay.
yes. All right.
So
Thank you, dear. Thank you. Just said dear, like you're like we're married or something.
basically.
My hetero life partner. Anyway,
All right.
well,
so-
while we're enjoying this, Danny, you said you made some ahead of time, right?
I did, and I used chocolate chips and peanut butter chips because I wanted to use butterscotch and I couldn't find them, and coconut and walnuts that I did not grind. I just kind of like put big chunks in there, and it's delicious. My graham cracker crust didn't adhere as much as I'd want. I think I should have used a little bit more butter. I didn't use a whole stick, but I mean, you cannot go wrong with those amazing ingredients. They're absolutely delicious.
Yeah.
What did Charles think of them?
I didn't tell him yet, so he's going to have them after the show.
Oh, wait, there wouldn't be any left. Every time I do an episode,
I know.
Charles eats everything before we even get on air. And there's this big thing about trying to keep Charles out of the kitchen. And so
Charles, for those who don't know, Charles is Danny's son.
Danny's son, who's been a frequent cameo appearance on.
Yeah.
This is wonderful.
Mm.
And then
And
Laura, you said,
yours are out of the oven?
Mine are out of the oven, but they're cooling right now. So they're still a little bit like they need to set. So I'll show them when they're set and ready.
okay, I think I'm getting diabetes right now, just from eating these, because there's so
Yeah.
much sugar, but they're really delicious.
Yeah.
And you can
I
also.
frankly can't imagine Carol Channing eating them because she was a health food nut I ran into her once at the Russian tea room. I mean, I ran into her, she was there, and she was with a big party, and it was amazing to see her dressed all in red, and she brought her own Tupperware. Everyone else was ordering off the menu, but she brought her own Tupperware of like organic food or I don't know what, and then passed out rhinestones to everyone in the audience. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We love Carol.
Love Carol Channing. We love Carol. Well, let's talk about this show, Hello, Dolly. Because Carrie hadn't seen it in a while. Came over this week, and we watched the movie version together. So I thought it would be helpful just to before we start talking about all of these actresses, to just talk about Hello, Dolly itself as a show very briefly, for people who haven't seen it in a while or maybe have never seen it. I want to say thank you to Richard Skipper, who put together a website called callondolly.com. I didn't know that this website existed until we started researching for this show. And it's an absolute gold mine of information about the show and about the actresses who have played Dolly, far more actresses than we're going to talk about today. So I did want to just give him a shout out and say thank you for making our research process very easy. And if people are a fan of this show, they should definitely go check out his website. I don't even know him, but I feel like I need to reach out and say hello.
I know him. He's a really cool, I mean, he knows everything about, and he knew Carol really well. And he was the one who produced the documentary about her life called Larger Than Life.
Oh, I've seen it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was Richard Skipper who did that. So
yeah, I was on his show once.
He's like, oh, you saw his show?
I was on it with Meredith Ponadell with our book about Face, about Dottie Ponadell. And yeah, he also produced, we can talk about later, Carol Cook's show in New York a few years ago. And yeah, he's the best. He's a great interviewer. You should listen to all his talks.
Yeah, and
for an episode.
Well, hey, thank you, Richard Skipper. We love you. Clearly, we all love you, and I look forward to meeting you one day if you're watching. Okay, so Hello, Dolly, the show. What I love about this recipe, why nobody actually knows why this recipe is called Hello, Dollies. Other than maybe somebody took a bite and said, hello, Dolly, but it's kind of apt too, because it's sort of like the show has, this has just kind of everything thrown together, and it shouldn't work, but it does work, but it's over the top. That's the show too. Everything just goes in and somehow it all blends together and works. The original Broadway production opened in January 1964, and that production ran until 1970. And there have been touring productions over the years. Everybody's got their local production that's done regularly. It was revived on Broadway, God knows how many times. I can't even keep track. So it's just one of those evergreen shows that keeps coming back. And like I said, I think the magic of it is that there's this role that there's a lot of room for the actress to bring her own interpretation. And so even if you've seen the show before, it's sort of like Hamlet, but like, a musical comedy version.
Or Streetcar,
right. But even if you've seen the show before, you want to see what this performer is going to do with it. And that's the magic of it. So it's originally based on a play by Thornton Wilder, who wrote Our Town, called Matchmaker, which was in turn based on a couple of turn of the century farces. And produced by David Merrick and directed and choreographed on Broadway by Gower Champion. The film version was directed and choreographed by Gene Kelly. The script was by Michael Stewart, and music and lyrics were by Jerry Herman. And it was his second show. His first show had been a moderate success called Milk and Honey. David Merrick asked him to come in and create all of songs for Hello, Dolly. And the world is better for it. They're wonderful. And Carrie had made a really interesting observation when we were watching the film. You said that it struck you as a reverse Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah, I'd seen the Hello, Dolly film with Barbara Streisand. ages ago on the Fox lot with a friend who used to work there. And it'd been so long since I'd seen it. So the other night I felt kind of like I was seeing it for the first time. I felt like a fresh slate. And yeah, I just kind of blurted that out. It's like a reverse taming of the shrew, but it kind of felt that way because she's trying to strong arm Mr. Vandergelder. And yeah, it felt really different than I had remembered it.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's also a story about a woman who has been putting herself second, who is finally putting herself first. I think that's part of what's so compelling about that character in that show. So it's set in this kind of Main Street USA version of America. It's, you know, the nostalgic turn of the century America that never really existed, but we all like to pretend and play with it. And Dolly Levi, Mrs. Dolly Levi, is a widow who, at one point, with her first husband, Ephraim, had just been a regular fixture in the night club scene of New York, going about spending their money, making people happy. As she says in the show, money is like manure; it doesn't work unless you spread it around. And that's what she believed. After her husband dies, she kind of retreats into her life, working as a professional matchmaker and just kind of all around fixer. So she goes around fixing everyone else's lives. And she gets hired by Horace Vandergelder, a wealthy Yonkers merchant, to find him a wife. And she decides that's going to be her. But she doesn't just go to him and say, how about me? No, she goes about this in the most convoluted way possible that involves all sorts of farcical elements, and leads to, in the end, spoiler alert, she gets Horace Vandergelder. He has learned how to treat her because he's kind of a misogynist, and he has reformed his ways. And then she also finds romantic happiness for 3 other couples along the way. And that's Hello Dolly. It's like the musical version of Cotton Candy. I love it. And there's hats. There's lots of ridiculous hats, which is why
I wanted to say something when Carrie said it was like the reverse taming of the shrew. I also wanted to make another literary reference that it's a lot like Emma, Jane Austen's Emma. And I think that's something that's been talked about a little bit, that those similarities are really prominent. I don't think that it was meant to be that way, but it just did. It just happened.
That's the thing, though. The original source material is Thornton Wilder. So, he definitely put things into his plays on purpose. I don't think he was capable of just writing something that was just a silly farce. Now, whether it was intentional to have all of those things in a musical, that I don't know, but I think it's in the source material, probably, that he probably was playing with all of that stuff.
Probably, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about our women. So
Okay.
One of my drama teachers in drama school, my dramatic literature teacher, Professor Leo Nicole, every time we talked about something that starred Carol Channing, he would just say, starring my friend Carol Channing. And so that has kind of become her name in my head. My friend Carol Channing. I adore her. And Laura, please tell us everything that you know about my friend Carol Channing, who I've never met. But
sure. Yes, I actually did meet Carol Channing, which I am really very proud to say. She most of what I prepared for this is mostly her as Dolly. But I'll start with my meeting Carol Channing. Why not?
oh, please do.
So yes, so I was a volunteer for a long time at a museum, unfortunately, that's no longer there in San Francisco, that dealt with sort of the cultural history of San Francisco and as it pertained to like entertainment. And so Carol Channing is from San Francisco. She was born there. She, I think, was raised part of her childhood was in Seattle, and then she, came back to San Francisco. But San Francisco is very proud of Carol Channing. She went to Lowell High School, and And so anyway, there was this event that was organized by this museum called Hello Carol. And Carol Channing was really excited about it. And she had this whole thing planned where she was going to do a show and then, visit the museum and all of that. And turned out that on that day when she was going to do a show, or maybe it was like a couple days before, I don't remember. But she had an accident and broke her hip. She fell and she couldn't do it. And so everybody was like really, sad about it. But she ended up being okay. Because she's Carol Channing, she always bounced back no matter what. But it was a pretty long recovery. It was like almost a year recovery, but the exhibit was still going. On the very last day of the exhibit, I got a phone call from my friend who was one of the organizers of the exhibit, and he said, Carol Channing is coming today, get out here now. So I was like, okay. So I got myself together, I went out there, and I had this like really cool like half an hour with Carol Channing, going around the exhibit and looking. She was telling stories about like all of the different photos and things in the exhibit. And I remember I asked her some questions, and when she answered, she had this look about her that was really, really interesting. She would look you right in the eye and keep her gaze. Like,
I've heard that from other people who've met her, that she sort of like seemed to like peer right into the pupils.
Will never forget that. I mean, just the way that she looked at me. And I mean, she like locked her gaze. And then afterward she signed, I had a little program, she signed my little program for me, and same thing, she signed my program, and I said, oh, thank you so much. And she was like, oh, you're so welcome, but kept looking at me like, whoa, Carol Channing is staring into my soul.
That should be cross-stitched on a pillow or something.
With like raspberries around it.
Yes,
I
raspberry.
learned to cross-stitch just for these purposes.
Yes, exactly. I don't want to take up too much. Well, I mean, Carol Channing is like.
Do you have too much time on Carol Channing?
Well, that's impossible. But Carol Channing is the Dolly. I mean, she's like the the original Dolly, the one who is sort of indelibly etched into our consciousness as Dolly, unless you do the Barbra Streisand thing, which is a whole other story. But she won the Tony.
We are going to talk about Barbra.
Yes,
I'm sure.
Yes. But she won the Tony in 1964 when she was up against Barbra Streisand. Barbra Streisand decided that she was Barbra Streisand was up for a funny girl, and Barbra Streisand, being Barbra Streisand, she, fast forward a couple of years, played the role that she lost the Tony to. So anyway, but it sort of an interesting note is that Carol Channing was not she was not the first choice for Dolly. Gower Champion, who we talked about before, Gower Champion didn't want her, thought that she was too what I want to say, she was too sort of attached to the role of Lorelei Lee, which she had played, Jump for Blondes. And
her girl's best friend for the it's
yes,
the role that was ultimately played by Marilyn Monroe.
Yes,
in the movie. So it's a very different kind of role than Dolly, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, most definitely. And he thought, oh, she can't do it, she's just Lorelei. And but they had originally wanted Ethel Merman. Ethel Merman had well, we'll get to Ethel Merman later.
We're talking about Ethel too. We're talking about
we'll talk about Ethel Merman later. But Ethel Merman had just come off Gypsy. She was really exhausted. She was like, I can't even think about this. So she turned it down, and they, long story short, ended up with Carol, and Gower Champion sort of coached her and made her this Dolly that she played for. She played the role a grand total of, with all the revivals and things like that, grand total of 5,000 times, more than 5,000 times.
And you can
She,
actually see like video of her doing that every time seemed fresh.
yeah, I mean, she
That
was
was part of her magic.
Yes, she was Dolly. She debuted, as we talked about, January 16th, 1964. She played the role again in revivals in 1978 and 1995.
And she originated it, right?
Yes, she
She's the
did.
first Dolly
She
on
was the
Broadway.
first Dolly
Yeah,
on
first
Broadway
Dolly.
ever.
She was the first Dolly and the Dolly. I mean, yeah.
Definitive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Well, I would argue there's not a definitive Dolly, but she's the Dolly that most people think of when they
right,
go, "Hello."
exactly. Yes, in that great red dress with the fan head thing, and
Big
yeah.
she's there.
Yes. So anyway, that's Carol as Dolly. I don't know if there's anything else we need to.
I'm sure it'll come up because we're going to talk about all these other, and Carol Chan, like they all kind of, some of their stories interweave with each other. So I'm sure,
Yeah, for sure.
I'm
Yeah.
sure we will be talking more about my friend Carol Channing.
Yeah.
But before we do that, before we move on, Danny needs to talk about his friend Carol, who's Carol Cook, who was the second Dolly ever.
Yes, I can say my friend Carol Cook, because she is a great friend. She's still with us at 98 and one of the funniest human beings on the planet. Just such a great person. I could see her doing it today. But what happened, so Carol Cook, born Mildred Cook in Abilene, Texas. She was given the name Carol by her mentor, Lucille Ball, after Lucille Ball's friend from her Goldwyn days, Carol Lombard. She thought that Carol reminded her of Carol Lombard. And Carol Cook is, I think she's just perfect for the role. And it's kind of bizarre that she got the part. She was the second Dolly for the tour in Australia, of all places, where she played it for like 2 years. She was a sensation. And they had wanted to get like a real big name, and there were people bandied about. I think at one point, now I'm forgetting who, but like even Julie Wilson, maybe, all these people they wanted to get to do it and they couldn't. And Carol had been kicking around for quite a while. She was in, why am I forgetting, Kurt Weill, Three Penny Opera with Lotte Lenya. She had made several movies. You might have seen her in The Incredible Mr. Limpet as Don Knotts' wife. She was in Palm Beach Weekend, and she was doing a lot of theater, but she was so perfect for this role and she wanted it so badly. She flew out to and she knew someone in the Hello Dolly casting world that had written something for her years earlier. And she got an audition on Sunday. She bowled them over so much, she had the part by Tuesday and had to like get ready to change her whole life and move to Australia for 2 years. She did it in New Zealand too. I remember her telling me something about like doing it for some Aboriginal tribe, and they gave her some honorary, membership. She was a sensation. The only, I don't know if she would even say this or if it's right to say, but like, drawback, she was a close friend of Lucy. She was in the Desilu Players with Robert Osborne and many other really interesting people. And she had been on the Lucy Show, the second version of Lucy's sitcoms, semi-regularly. And Lucy was apparently devising, she thought she'd be great in her own sitcom. Well, that never happened because of Dolly. And so, maybe you could look at it as kind of hurt her career in a way because she was like out of the picture of Hollywood for quite a while. But I don't think she'd ever take it back. And of course, in later years, she used to perform every year at the stage benefit for AIDS research. And she would always sing a wonderful version of Before the Parade Passes By and so many of the songs. She was just perfect for it. I have some pictures of her as Dolly. Here you can see her in full regalia. And of course, she was friends with Carol Channing and participated in several things shortly before Carol Channing's death, where several of the Dollies would appear and they would sing songs from the show. Here's a great shot of Carol as Dolly. But she is so perfect in the role. I wish it had been recorded. I just wish I could have seen a full production of Carol Cook as Dolly, because she was and is one of a kind. She still lives here in LA with her husband, Tom Troop, also a wonderful actor. Richard Skipper, who we were talking about, produced Carol I think she was 95 at the time. She's 98 now, did a show at Feinstein's in New York that was sold out for 2 nights. I mean, God love this woman, and she is, again, she's every bit as with it and funny today as she ever was. So she was a wonderful second Dolly. Something she always was very close to Carol Channing about for the rest of Carol Channing's life.
There's actually on YouTube, there is a clip of Carol Cook singing Before the Parade Passes By and doing the monologue that leads into it.
Probably from one of the stage benefits, and it's worth watching if you can.
Yeah, she does a beautiful job with it. And she makes it her own. You can compare how Carol Channing did to how she did it. Completely different.
Totally different.
Both very valid and wonderful to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think she even still has the red feather thing in her house, the hat. It was a big part of her life. And she did it here a few times as well in later years as like a benefit here and there. And just, I wish I had gotten to see it. I still beg her to sing songs from the show whenever I see her.
I mean, I would too, frankly.
Yeah.
It would just be like, I would say you need to just make a recording of that as your doorbell chime or something.
Yeah.
We all show up to her house and beat on the door. Please sing it.
She starred in one of my father-in-law Oliver Haley's plays called Father's Day with Barbara Rush. That's how we knew her, and then she became a friend of the family. And there was always all the people. Father's Day starred Barbara Rush, Carol, Chris Pine, the actor's parents. Both of them were actors in that show. And every Father's Day, I'm like, get them, because often we see them at my mother-in-law's house, and like get them in the living room, shove the scripts in their hand. Let's do Father's Day on Father's Day. It's one of my wish things, even though we're all getting up there now. I
love it. Oh, that's fun. And Danny, you mentioned that all of the there's like a club almost, of the Dollies, and they often do benefits or did benefits together, did shows together, and that's such a perfect transition to who I'm going to talk about, which is great Pearl Bailey. Everyone loves Pearl Bailey. Like when we announced we were going to do this show, just the reaction on social media was just Pearl Bailey, Pearl Bailey, Pearl Bailey, Pearl Bailey. I'm so excited about Pearl
Bailey.
And
we are planning a standalone Pearl Bailey episode in the future that is in the works eventually.
Yeah. So Pearl Bailey and Carol Channing had some television specials together, which if people haven't seen them, we should. They were wonderful. And it was just, they had such respect for each other's talents, and they were genuinely friends, genuinely supported each other. When Pearl Bailey stepped into the role of Dolly, she was actually given an honorary Tony Award for it, because she just kind of talk about making it your own. Like she took the role and found completely new things with it. Not that Carol Cook didn't, but she wasn't playing the role on Broadway. The Tony Award ceremony was great because Carol Channing went out and introduced her, and you can see this on YouTube. The clip is out there, and it's just delightful that she talks about handing the role off to Pearl Bailey, and is just so supportive. And it's a beautiful thing to see actresses who have that much respect for each other and lift each other up. So Pearl Bailey's Hello Dolly is near and dear to my heart because that's the album that we had in my household growing up. I played it a lot. My dad actually saw that production. If I had a time machine, that's the production I would like to go back and see. Because it wasn't just Pearl Bailey, it was Pearl Bailey with Cab Calloway playing the role of Horace Vandergelder. and even just hearing like that soundtrack, it just kind of like their performances just leap off. And I can only imagine what that would have been like to see that in a theater too. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because I want to talk about Pearl Bailey. For those who maybe don't know about Pearl Bailey, this is a woman who I don't think there was anything that she couldn't do. She wrote a book all about food. And
I can go get it.
You can
I'll
go get it. Okay,
Yes,
well,
I'll
here
go
he's
get
getting
it.
this. So it's not so much a cookbook. It's really a foodie memoir. Like it is about her relationship to food and recipes and the food that she eats, and she's just kind of telling stories about things. And it is great fun. Don't try and cook along with it because it doesn't quite work. But we're gonna come up with some recipe that based on her stories.
Come
about
hell or
food.
high water.
Yeah. But on top of that, she was a singer, she was a comedian, she was an actress, she was the host of a TV variety show, she was a civil rights activist, she was a theologian, she was an author in addition to that book, a whole bunch of other books. She was a cook, as we said, and a baseball fan. She was a huge Mets fan. Like, I don't think she slept. It's just that simple.
It reminds me of, can I say something?
Yeah.
It reminds me of, there's a quote from the movie To Wong Foo, To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar.
Love that movie.
Where, one of the drag queens says, the marvelous Pearl Bailey, whose birthday I think should be a national banking holiday.
I think so too.
I was like,
absolutely.
yes, let's make her birthday a national banking holiday.
Absolutely. Pearl Bailey,
adore her.
birthday
Adore
should definitely be a holiday. So she started out as a nightclub singer in the 1930s and when she was a teenager, and then moving into the 40s. Her first big Broadway role was in 1946 in St. Louis Woman, which was a score by Harold Arlen. And it's one of those stories in Broadway about, this unknown goes in and stops the show cold, which she did. And her songs, the two songs there were Legalize My Name and It's a Woman's Prerogative. So already right out of there, she'd set kind of her brand, as it were, as this sassy, tough lady who wasn't afraid to express her own mind. And you can see that again in 1954. She played the lead role in House of Flowers, which again was a score by Harold Arlen, based on a book by Truman Capote with a script and supposedly lyrics by Truman Capote, although I have my doubts that he had the patience to write lyrics, but there we go. But in that, she played an unapologetically polyamorous and protective, but also scheming madam of a bordello. Very racy, but really, really fun. And I'm also quite partial to her recording of Baby It's Cold Outside. It's one of the few ones that's not creepy because she makes it so clear that she's in control of this situation, she's playing a game, she's having fun. It's the only way that you can make that song work. So go listen to it. Maybe you won't hate it so much. It takes out some of the creepy factor. And in 1950, she was in a production of Arms and the Girl on Broadway, which is a very short run of a show. Wasn't a big hit, but she faced really rampant racism backstage. But here's the thing: this is Pearl Bailey. Part of why we love her is that she didn't take it, and she just went out and demanded an apology, told the press, told everybody, and made that story blow up. And she got an apology, and they did fix it. And it, in a time when I think a lot of actors she was still just being given opportunities, she was still in a supporting role. I think that took a lot of courage for her to do that. That's Pearl Bailey. But her version of Hello Dolly started out as a touring cast, and it was an all Black production because if you were gonna, in 1967, if you were going to take Hello Dolly around with a Black lead, there were places where you had to have an all Black cast. You certainly had to have a Black chorus because colorblind casting and interracial marriage was when was Loving versus, was that, does anybody remember? If anybody out there remembers, around that time.
I think
So-
it was like 69 or so, or something like
Yeah,
that.
so I think it was
Pretty
still,
early.
yeah, so it was still even, illegal for interracial marriages, which, by the way, Pearl Bailey was herself in an interracial marriage. So, that's why they had to do the all black cast, but they, at the same time, it sort of hit the reset button on this show, and it was an extraordinary cast. And their decision to cast Cab Calloway in it changed one of the big problems with the show, which is, why does this really extraordinary woman want this horrible guy? Because there's really nothing about this character that makes you go, yeah, sure, he's great, of course she wants him. But Cab Calloway brought so much charm to it that it's like, obviously she wants him, and obviously he's just he's sort of a cad as opposed to a misogynist,
Or a diamond in the rough that
Yeah.
she can come in and rehabilitate and shape and polish, if you will.
yeah, exactly. And so that's also one of the problems. The other problem with this is, why does everybody do what Dolly says to do? Like, she just kind of comes in and says, do this, and everybody goes, okay. And often the way that the production solved that is just by making everybody really, really stupid. But they didn't have to do that with this version, because Pearl Bailey just played everything like a Sherman tank. Like, she just rolls in, starts bellowing at people, you do this, you do that, stop crying, go over there, learn to dance, do it. And it's just, it seems like they're just sort of stunned into submission.
When
Like,
she spoke, you listened,
right,
regardless of what it was that she was telling you.
exactly.
But
But
Pearl Bailey bellows at you, you do what she says.
you do what she said. But that's part of the magic of that production, is that everybody could be an intelligent human being on that stage as an actor, in their character choices.
Dare I ask, was that ever filmed?
There's clips of it. There's clips of it that were done and restaged that you can find on YouTube. You can find many things on YouTube. And they're delightful.
Can I just,
She was a variety show fixture when I was a kid. And I mean, I just loved her so much. And if I can just do one quick aside,
Oh yeah.
on the one hand, the reason they had to change the entire cast because they couldn't have interracial, yuck. On the other hand, yay, because it did breathe such fresh life into it, and it's such a great cast. But it was a trend then. And when I was little and I went to New York for one of the first times, there was an all-black version of Guys and Dolls, which was amazing, with Robert Guillaume and all these amazing actors. And I didn't know the play yet. So that was my definitive Guys and Dolls. And I remember asking my mother, like, because I knew enough from my own family background, like, why are the Black people talking Yiddish? Because they didn't really change any of the dialogue. And it was like so weird that they would just, because I don't think they made, today, if they did an all Black version of some very, famous play, I think they would adapt it somewhat. But it made for some great productions, even though today we look back and think, oh, too bad that was necessary. Why not have an interracial cast?
Right. Yeah, that trend in the late 60s that you're talking about of doing, the all Black cast of whatever, I think that it was one of those things that, for its time, it was progressive. That I think that coming off of the time when minstrelsy was seen by a lot of white people as that's how Black people are. Taking a show like Hello Dolly, where it's Main Street USA, and changing absolutely nothing about it except for the color of the character's skin, but it's still Main Street USA America, and nobody is doing the minstrel kinds of tropes. It's that today I think we would say that culture, and we have conversations about culture and honoring every culture. And I think that at the time, the white people who were producing these shows, I think saw that as progressive. And good for them for trying. And would we be where we are now were it not for those kinds of productions getting some of the white people who were maybe a little bit uncomfortable with Black people to kind of just getting them used to it. It's an incremental change.
so I wanted to say that I was so excited. Like this was a couple years ago, probably, when I found on iTunes the Pearl Bailey Hello Dolly. And I downloaded it and it was all like so great. I was like, oh, I love this. I love this. I love this. It's like my favorite cast recording. I think it's just so brilliant and she's amazing. But then recently I went back to listen to it again and it's gone. They took it off.
It goes on and on, but you know what? If you go over to if it's not on Apple Music, then pop over to Amazon Music, because I've noticed that these cast recordings of Hello Dolly, they tend to only have like one or two rather than all of them, and they sort of flip. So they'll go from one streaming service to the other.
Yeah, I was like, where is it? I can't find it.
And it says too much about me that I know where the Hello Dollies are.
It doesn't. It says everything about you.
The other thing that I wanted to say just about Pearl Bailey is she is one of my favorite parts of the movie Carmen Jones, with the beat out that rhythm on the drum bit. It's just so good.
Yeah, she's a force of nature.
She is a force of nature. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, and I think, Carrie, you brought up, we were talking the other week and you were like, Fox and the Hound.
Yes.
Her role in the Disney animated movie from the early 80s, the Fox and the Hound. If you're a certain age like we are, you love that movie.
Yes, that movie was like actually one of my favorite movies as a little kid, because I love the idea that two people that come from totally different backgrounds, different worlds, different planets, whatever, that they have a bond and they become friends. And Lord knows a lot of my friends come from different languages, countries, cultures, and there's something so beautiful about the bonds of friendship transcending the strictures of society or transcending all these other things. And The Fox and the Hound has always been one of my favorites. And I think it's like one of the most underrated Disney movies ever, because like nobody really talks about that movie. And I find it to be a gem.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, if you were a certain age, you saw it,
Yes.
You love it. Everybody else doesn't know about it. People should go see it. Okay, I'm gonna change our order around just a little bit, because I know, Laura, you said you have to go at a certain point. So want to make sure that you have a chance to talk all about Ethel Merman, one of our dollies. So let's go to Ethel next, and then we'll come back to some of the other dollies.
Sure. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Ethel Merman, because I think that maybe people don't really know that the musical was originally written for Ethel Merman. That she and you can really hear it, like when you listen to like the way that the songs go, and the sort of the, what I want to say, like the range, right? The range of octaves and things like that. It sounds like it should be Ethel Merman, right? I mean, but we've gotten so used to hearing like Carol Channing, right? That we're like, oh, this is a Carol Channing thing, but it's, but if you listen to it and you think Ethel Merman, it's like, oh yeah, that sounds like it should be Ethel Merman. But she turned it down. Mary Martin did as well. Well, I think we're going to talk about Mary Martin in a bit.
We're going to talk about Mary Martin. Yes.
Yes. But she had been doing Gypsy, and she had been, she was exhausted with what she was doing. She decided to sort of expand her horizons a little bit. She went and did television and did, all kinds of other stuff. But then she got kind of bored and went back to Broadway. And in the late 60s, she decided to take over the role for 3 months. And so she did, and she was such a sensation. I mean, she was a Broadway sensation legend anyway, as probably most of the people watching this show will know. And movies, and movies just a little bit, kind of in the early 30s. She did this movie called We're Not Dressing with Carole Lombard that was completely ridiculous. But anyway, mostly Broadway. She went back, did this role in Hello Dolly, and she got such an ovation that she could barely get her lines out. And there's video of it. I don't know if I can share. Can I share, Carrie?
Let me make you the host, or make you a, hang on just a sec, let me.
Okay, yeah, because I YouTube video where the crowd is just like going wild when she appears. And it just
Okay, I just made you the co-host, so that should, ouch, that should.
Don't put yourself
Okay.
in you.
That should give you screen share abilities.
okay, so I just want to play a little bit of this.
Is this from the bootleg where some gorgeous, wonderful soul has put up the entire, like a recording
It's
of
this.
her entire show, the audio recording?
Well, excerpt from complete newly found recording. So
Yeah.
yes, I guess so.
Yeah, that whole
Um,
thing, the whole recording is available on YouTube if you put in Ethel
Yeah.
Merman, Hello Dolly.
See, I don't know if you can see, but it doesn't really
Yeah,
matter.
yeah.
Okay, so here she goes. Listen to that. I mean, have you ever in your life heard an ovation like that? I mean, just it's completely just incredible.
Do you think she regretted turning it down, Laura? Because I mean, despite, I don't care how exhausted she was, to see that part on the page, I'm just amazed that she was able to turn it down, and I wonder if she regretted that decision.
Well, I saw on Richard Skipper's wonderful site, there was a letter that she wrote about it. Hold on, let me pull it up again.
I mean, while Laura's looking for that,
Yeah.
one of the facts about Ethel Merman is that she never missed a performance in her life.
No.
And
Neither did Carol Channing, as a matter of fact.
yeah, there is an interview. I can't remember who the interviewer was, but there's an interview that I saw later in life where they asked her, "Did you have any regret?" And that was one of her regrets, was that she chose to go on and do the shows even when she needed to really show up as a mother for a very serious thing. Her child was in the hospital and she left there to go do the show. And that was something that haunted her, I think, that so, it's possible that there was things going on in her personal life that make her feel like when she's in a show, she is in a show.
Mhm.
And so it's better to just not be in a show.
And I'm sure Carol Channing got on her hands and knees every night till she died, thanking God that Ethel Merman turned that down.
Turn it down, exactly.
Yeah. So here, the letter she wrote to David Merrick's office. Thanks for your note with the copy of the Matchmaker story. However, I couldn't be less interested in another property at this time. And as far as my plans are concerned after Gypsy, who knows? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Yeah. That was that. But I just thought it was, I mean, the thing that I wanted to mostly say about Ethel Merman is that it really is an Ethel Merman show. Like you can hear it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to do and show that clip about her.
I wonder if
Getting
they
that
changed the score a little bit when she did take over,
They
because
did.
I mean, I love Carol Channing, but her range was not the same.
Right.
There were a couple of songs that had been removed from the show, and I think they were just put in the trunk. It's called the trunk song. When the
Yeah.
song was just put in
Two, I think, right?
trunk. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they pulled out a couple of the songs that had been cut and restored them. And you can hear them on that recording that I mentioned. This on YouTube with everything. They're good songs.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, on that note, I am actually going to have to leave because I have to get ready. I have a student that I have to prepare for. So I don't know if anybody wants to pick up.
Well,
but-
happy to pick up. Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you for
yes, thank you for
Laura.
having me. This was really fun. It's always really fun. I love
We
what
will
you do. Karen.
shoulder on without you. Thank you.
And thank you
Thank
for always
you.
being so game to be on Hollywood Kitchen, by the way.
Oh, my pleasure. Yes. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, Laura.
Bye.
Oh, well, Carrie, you have been the excellent host, but I think we need to hear from you about
Okay.
your Dolly that you picked.
Okay, my Dolly that I picked to talk about was Yvonne DiCarlo, because surprise, surprise, I am a monster kid. And when I was a little girl, my first introduction to her, as many people's, was as Lily Munster in the Munsters. I spent so much time fantasizing about wanting to live next door between the Munsters and the Addams family, with my mom and dad's house in the middle. And yeah, that was an obsession. And also, I'm a noir obsessive. So she was in Crisscross, my favorite noir. So she kind of checks off a lot of boxes for me. And with regards to her playing Hello Dolly, I watched footage of her singing the song I'm Still Here on YouTube that Sondheim wrote
For Follies.
for Follies.
Wrote for her.
And one of the themes that I kind of picked up on in researching and reading about Yvonne DiCarlo was how constantly she was underestimated, because she was stunningly beautiful, very exotic, very curvaceous. And I think because of that, and this happens a lot, unfortunately, people just assumed she had no talent, she wasn't smart, she wasn't good, she was just a glamour girl or a showgirl, and that was it. And time again, she would prove people wrong. You know, even on the set of the Munsters, they thought she was a lightweight, and they didn't think much of her until she started doing scenes, and then they were like, holy crap, this woman can act, she's great.
Yeah.
So that kind of had to have been very frustrating, to be constantly treated like you're not good enough and you're not capable just because you're pretty. It's ridiculous. But
Can I just interject?
yeah, sorry, I'm ranting.
No, you're not ranting at all. It's very like to carry on your rant. You mentioned the Stephen Sondheim song "I'm
Yes,
Still
I
Here"
did.
from Follies. That was a replacement song. So that role, so Stephen Sondheim originally didn't really want her in that role, and nobody really knows why she did, because it's a minor role. But Harold Prince, the producer and director of Follies, said, nope, want her, need her, love her, gotta have her. And the original song that Stephen Sondheim had written for that character was a lightweight song. It was called "Can That Boy Foxtrot?" The F is very important. So it was, it was kind of a riff on kind of "My Heart Belongs to Daddy," right? Very tongue-in-cheek, kind of, wink, wink. And they realized that no, she could do more. And so they wrote polar opposite songs, which is "I'm Still Here," which is one of the great women's songs in musical theater history, especially for women of a certain age. It's a powerhouse song. And yeah, it's got some oomph to it.
And it really kind of reflects too her life, because if you dig into her life, she had a lot of pain and setbacks and hardship like crazy. So that song feels, I don't know if Sondheim knew a lot about her backstory, but that song feels so indicative of what she went through in her life, And so yeah, it's on YouTube, and it's so good. And yeah, so many of these people, I wish I could have seen these performances live, because it would have just been incredible. But she I'm sure she brought a totally different ethos, of course, to Dolly as well. And that's one of the most unlikely people to play her. Like when you go through the list of people that played her, you're like, wait a minute, Yvonne DiCarlo, the femme fatale and Crisscross played Hello Dolly, like what,
But Lily Munster was a little bit of a, ballabusta like that. She ran the show a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that.
Did she
show.
do it on Broadway, Carrie, or was it regionally?
I think she toured a regional tour in the late 60s.
She was one of the touring cast. There were in the late 60s, there were, I don't know how many touring casts of this show, just going all over the world. And she was in one of the US tours.
And Dorothy Lamour, who I always think of her when I think of Yvonne DiCarlo, I don't know why, maybe the exotic, did it as well, right? I think she did it in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah, and again, I think it's like we had talked about earlier, this is, once actresses kind of reach a certain age, there's so often the roles become fewer, unfortunately. And for a role like Dolly to come along, like I think that's how they ended up with all of these wonderful actresses who could do more, who had a lot more to add, to suddenly were given that opportunity to break out of the boxes of whatever they had been put in their youth by the Hollywood machine.
I'd love to see a list of all the actresses who played both Mama Rose and Dolly.
Oh,
it's
that
or starting with Ethel Merman, but I bet there's quite a bunch. In fact, I often thought, you know, when Bette Midler did it, I thought she would have been perfect. I didn't see her version. I saw Betty Buckley, but I loved Patti LuPone's Gypsy, and I would have loved to have seen, maybe we still will, see Patti LuPone as Dolly. I thought she would be great.
Patti LuPone as Dolly would be very interesting. Patti, if you're watching,
Please.
right, of course you're sitting here watching our show. Patti, if you're watching, we beg you. Thank you.
You know what I don't get is why, like, as actors or actresses, and it's worse for actresses, get older, the roles get fewer. Because part of one of the freelance things I do is work with seniors, and I just think that people that are, as they get older, they have more wisdom, they have more experience, they have more stories, they have a deeper well, if you will. And I just feel like we live in such a youth obsessed, age obsessed society. And I just think the older people get, the more they have to offer the world, which seems so converse to the kind of roles that unfortunately they're relegated to. And it just saddens me that they're not much more prevalent in movies and film and theater, because they should be. They should.
Elaine Stritch had a really funny line in her wonderful show that's, you can hear the whole thing on CD, about all the younger stars who perform I'm Still Here, you know, and she named people like in their 40s and even in their 30s, and she would say, "You're still here, where have you been?" I mean, she just thought it was ridiculous for anyone young to sing that.
It's true. It's absolutely true. But that actually is a very good transition. These beautiful transitions that we have, because there is a Dolly that we need to talk about. One of the Dollies, who is often criticized for being too young to play the role when she played it, and that is Barbra Streisand.
Boy, and I will preface my discussion of that with, I love Barbra Streisand. She's fantastic. Funny Girl, nothing could be better. It was only her misfortune that came out the same year as Hello, Dolly, because I think almost any other year in that decade, she would have won hands down. But let's be real. She was 25 years old. It was ridiculous. Of course, she's great. Of course, she performs the songs beautifully. And I mean, I even think she has the right kind of personality. You know, being kind of take charge was no mystery for Barbra Streisand. But even she herself, finally, years later, in a James Lipton interview, said, I was too young for that role. I should have turned it down. But, you know, I mean, just even looking at, I have some pictures here. First of all, I'll say the costumes by Irene Sharaff in the movie were so unbelievably gorgeous.
They're stunning.
She was nominated for an Oscar. Irene did not win. And interestingly, the famous red gown that every single Dolly on the stage wore, I don't know if it was, you know, in deference to Carol Channing that she didn't want to wear that, or, you know, maybe she just wanted her own thing, but they created this amazing gold thing that was it weighed 40 pounds. I saw it really close because it was part of the Debbie Reynolds auction, and they had a preview where you could go see it. Just absolutely incredible. But Barbara got the part, and by the way, Carol Channing was devastated. And apparently, although many people were considered, I mean, I remember hearing that Elizabeth Taylor even, you know, and I think she said, I can't sing.
She should have said that when it came time to the film version of A Little Night Music too. She should have said, I can't sing.
Or Bluebird.
Yes.
But even Julie Andrews, which, you know, I worship Julie Andrews as much as I worship all of them, but no.
Yeah.
And she had the, you know, self-knowledge to know that one's not for me. But Barbra Streisand, Funny Girl, the movie hadn't even come out yet, but she was a major sensation. And they were just, I mean, it's kind of a miracle. I mean, they just knew. And of course, then she made the movie and won an Oscar for it. And they just knew what they had. But I mean, it was really, you know, I wish it had been Carol Channing. I wish it had been some of the other older women that could have done the part. I saw it recently. My whole family went, and, you know, I enjoy it. I mean, it's an amazing, lavish production. It did not, well, it's not that it was, I think, one of the top box office hits that year, but it cost so much to make. I think it was the most expensive musical to date. It's really interesting because they filmed you know, all around the country, but also built this insanely elaborate 1890s New York street in 20th Century Fox backlot. They'd already started building Century City because they had to sell most of the backlot. That was in that horrible time period where all the backlots were falling. And so they built these big structures to hide the towers that were going up of Century City. And I mean, I think that was it. I think that was the last big, you know, giant set. In fact, it was so expensive that it appears in several other films. I think it's in the Escape from Planet of the Apes, they have that street. There's some shots of it, I think in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. There's the Ansonia Gardens, is that what the restaurant's called? That was such an enormous set, it took them 1 month to film the famous scene.
Yes, the garden,
The restaurant.
The restaurant, yeah.
You can see in that that amazing wall from the ballroom in The Sound of Music, that's in there. Some of the amazing light fixtures from Poseidon Adventure are in there. I mean, they spent so much money and it did not do as well as they hoped. They didn't really recoup because it was so expensive that they used that stuff as much as they possibly could. Another big problem I have with the film is that there is literally zero chemistry between Barbra Streisand and Walter Matthau. And sometimes these things are just rumors that take a life of their own. No, they despised each other. They hated each other. And, you know, I mean, reading about it, I think he sounds like a bit of a pig, but in that context, I love Walter Matthau.
The role, really, you know.
Yeah, true. Maybe he was just in character. But, you know, looking at it from his point of view, here's this woman who, as far as he hadn't even seen her in a film yet. And, you know, I mean, I never buy the stuff that Barbra Streisand was like, you know, hard to work with. I think she just knew certain things and didn't shy away from expressing her opinion. In a man, that might have been lauded. In a woman, she was difficult, you know, and a bitch. But she
I think not to, sorry to interrupt you, she was a perfectionist. I think in some people like Susan Sondheim, who were also perfectionists, saw that, respected it, said, yes, let's be perfectionists together. And then there were other people who just wanted to, you know, show up and do the job the way that they've always done it and get through the day. And why are you bringing this up and making a big deal out of this thing?
And within the context of acknowledging, and she herself even, that she was miscast in the role, she does an amazing job. I mean, and if there's any chemistry in the film, to me, it's in the scene at the restaurant with Louis Armstrong, who'd made a big hit with the song Hello, Dolly, and they sing it together. And I wish that went on and on because it was fantastic. You can tell they loved each other, and you can tell that she and Walter Matthau despised each other. But it's also the first movie of Tommy Tune, you know, E.J. Peeker's in it, who I loved. She had just come from her musical, you guys are too young, but I remember this when I was a kid. I loved it. It was every week, it was a show with her, E.J. Peeker, and Robert Morse called That's Life. And every single week, it followed a story of this couple, this newlywed couple, but it was a complete musical. I don't even know how they did it. Just amazing show. So it was an interesting production. It was over the top. It did not get great reviews. In fact, Gene Siskel called it, you know, boring and overblown. You know, but the public went to see it. I mean, 20th Century Fox really, you know, put out, it was reserved seating. I remember that from when I was little. I saw it in Chicago at the big downtown theater, reserved seats. Of course, we thought it was outrageous. They were $3. You know, we thought, what? Who would ever pay $3 for a movie? But
how little we knew.
You know, great that she got to, you know, and of all the people they did consider, apparently they never considered Carol Channing. They just didn't think she could carry it. And she had made Thoroughly Modern Millie, some say almost like as an audition piece. And I think she's great in that part.
Wonderful in Thoroughly Modern Millie.
What?
In Thoroughly Modern Millie, she's wonderful in it.
Wonderful. But if anything, that fully sank the role for her because they just thought that's not Dolly and she can't do that. And, you know, maybe they're right in terms of attracting people to the theater, although they were taking a chance on Barbra Streisand, except her name, her mythology was already growing, and then she won the Oscar. You know, it's kind of like Julie Andrews, you know, getting The Sound of Music before there was any footage of her out there, but she had started Mary Poppins and of course she had done My Fair Lady, and it was just growing. But so the movie is fascinating to watch. I do recommend it. You know, when I saw it when I was little, and that was my first knowledge of Hello, Dolly. And I knew, you know, Funny Girl, and I knew Barbara Streisand, and we were a Jewish family, and her name was Levi. So I just always assumed it's a Jewish story. It's about this Jewish Yenta, you know, matchmaker, but it's not. She's Irish. And in the, you know, yes, the last name works because Levi could be easily and is often a Jewish name, but her name was Dolly Gallagher Levi. They just left off the Gallagher in the movie version. And kind of recreated. I mean, there's a bit of Annie Bryce in there, let's be honest, although I do think Barbara Streisand has a good range. I am in no way dissing Barbara Streisand on any subject, except I'd rather see her do it now. Would be interesting, you know, because I mean, or, you know, even 10 years ago, I mean, it was ridiculous. You know, they talk about, I assume they did not leave this line in the film, but it was clear that I think they kept talking about 14 years earlier, when she was 11 with her husband.
Yeah.
No, kind of insane. But, you know, and the one thing Carol Channing, I mean, I've heard that she was like near suicidal for a while, but then later on was like, oh, thank God, they can never blame that on me. So.
Bullet dodged. Yeah. I
But,
think
you know,
one thing you talked about, Danny, is the chemistry, because I think there are so many movies that are either made or unmade by star chemistry. And that's something that I think is so important to a movie, because think about how many movies you've seen over your lifetime of film going that, oh my God, they were so great together on screen. That's what really sold that story, versus when it doesn't work. And it's kind of this mysterious thing. It's either there or it's not there. And almost no amount of great acting can overcome bad chemistry.
And even hating each other in real life sometimes could work for the part. Like you say, he was supposed to be a curmudgeon. It just doesn't work here. I used to fantasize, I don't know how this would have been, of Cary Grant at that time period playing Horace Van. Wouldn't that have been fun? Cary Grant and Barbara Streisand.
Exactly, sort of like with Cab Calloway, like the natural charm.
Yeah.
This character into somebody that you're kind of okay with. Like you can see that you can see why she's into him. You can see that there is, you know, he can be redeemed. He can be turned around.
And you sure as hell don't see that here, except, you know, the only thing because she talks about how he's half a millionaire. Okay, so you just want him for his money? I mean, that's not
yeah,
really
exactly.
And then at the end, when he suddenly switches, you know, that he's okay with it, it doesn't ring true at all. And apparently he didn't even want to kiss Barbara Streisand. So they had to do clever camera angles in the scene where they're at the end. He's finally in love with her, which you never, ever believe. Yeah, casting in this film, very odd. Gorgeous production, Gene Kelly. I've heard this I would rather, like, we should ask Patricia Ward Kelly, his widow, you know, because I've also heard that she didn't get along with Gene Kelly, but I'm a little doubtful of that one. I know she didn't get along with Walter Matthau, but I'd like to hear more on her relationship with Kelly, who did, you know, I think an amazing job. I mean, it was an enormous production. The extras they had was unbelievable. And, you know, some of the numbers are fantastic.
Yeah,
but
it's fantastic. It's amazing. And
overall, it just doesn't work that well. I would vote for a remake on this one. If we can do West Side Story, let's do a new Hello, Dolly.
Hey, so here's my casting suggestion, by the way, because one actor that you didn't mention who was in the film, who I thought was cast beautifully, is Michael Crawford.
Right.
Who
Cornelius Hackle.
Before he was, you know,
Mm-hmm.
being my angel of music, you know, before he was the Phantom of the Opera. That was my terrible impression. Oh yes.
And you know, they wanted to dub him, and Gene Kelly said, "No way, his voice is good." You know, ironically, yeah.
Yeah. So, but before he was that, he was the nerdy male lead, and he's so delightful in that role too, and played a similar role in Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Farm. And it's just very strange to think that that's the guy who turned into the Phantom of the Opera later in his career. But I think it would be interesting to do a remake and to put him in as Horace now. And
perfect. I love it.
Full circle moment.
Just full circle moment, but also he is charming. He has like you know, he has a good charisma. Like, we'll see.
Who would you cast as Dolly in our 2023 roadshow production of?
Oh,
I mean, there's good candidates all over the place.
so many people. I mean, that's the thing. I can't think just off the top of my head, you know. There's
Patti LuPone, Bernadette Peters. There's so many people of that age that would be fantastic.
so many actresses and so many actresses who aren't necessarily household names. You
Mhm.
know, who could have a springboard from that sort of thing. Yeah, like Christine Ebersole would be wonderful.
Yep.
Like, I haven't seen her do a single bad role ever.
The thing about making a musical in today's world that costs that much money is the fact that the risk factor of spending that much money on a genre that's very hit or miss. And when you don't have a big name cast, I mean, the remake of West Side Story was great, but when you don't have these big names, it makes it harder to sell it. And that
Yes.
makes it harder for it to get made. And it's kind of a whole thing.
Yeah. I hope it's being discussed somewhere. I wouldn't mind it one bit.
I think it would be a good candidate for those shows, you know, that they've kind of come back to doing the, you know, big live production of whatever.
Mm.
And I think Hello Dolly would be a good candidate for that
Oh,
because
that's a good idea.
there's such a big cast.
Off the subject, are they ever going to do a musical movie of Sunset Boulevard? Because there were all these rumors it was going to happen with Glenn Close right after the
Oh,
year
yeah.
she didn't
Yeah,
get the
yeah,
Oscar
yeah.
to Olivia Colman. There were all these rumors it was going to happen, and then the pandemic hit and all this.
I heard that it was still going to happen, but you know, who knows? I don't know if it's still in development hell. Speaking of Patti LuPone, I like her version better. Sorry, Glenn Close fans.
Okay, we might have to fight about that one, but
Oh, okay.
no, we don't need to fight on air. We can have a nice debate among each other.
I do love Christine Ebersole and Grey Gardens. That's one of my favorite musicals.
I have another Dolly though that we need to talk
Okay.
about that we haven't talked about yet before we sign out. We've talked about just in brief, but Mary Martin. We haven't talked about my beloved Mary Martin. And I meant to bring it, but I didn't, I forgot it because I actually do have in my very small collection of Broadway ephemera, I have an original playbill from the original production of South Pacific that Mary Martin was in. And it's one of my little treasures. So I'll bring it some other time because I think we should actually do a whole Mary Martin episode at some point.
Okay.
Because I have a recipe. Never actually made it, but I have a recipe. We should try making it.
We should try making it first.
Yeah. But for people who do want to know more about Mary Martin, please learn more about Mary Martin. There's a wonderful biography by David Kaufman. It's called Some Enchanted Evenings, The Glittering Life and Times of Mary Martin. It's an excellent read, and everyone should go pick it up.
We could almost do a spin-off Broadway Kitchen.
Broadway
and just
Kitchen to talk about because there was so much
crossover. Yeah.
And I think Mary Martin is like Ethel Merman, is one of those people that she was a titan of the Broadway stage, who also made some movies. And
Never quite hit it. Just kind of like Ethel Merman, although I always loved There's No Business Like Show Business, the movie.
yes, yeah,
But you know, like with the two of them, I were so huge on Broadway and I think should have been big movie stars for whatever reason.
yeah. I don't know why Mary Martin didn't quite click. Because her she had big success on Broadway, and which we'll talk about in a minute, but then she did come to Hollywood and tried to make movies, and I think they just didn't know what to do with her.
Mhm.
They just kind of like shoved her in here, sing this, and kind of treated her like every other starlet, which she wasn't.
We're getting a few questions. Catherine Bird wants to know, and this is interesting, did Debbie Reynolds ever play Dolly?
Boy, I can so see that. It's kind of a Molly Brown kind of character, but not that I know of. And I'm
Yeah, I
surprised.
would love to have seen that. And Benjamin made a comment too that I thought was interesting here. He said, I once saw Hello Dolly on a stage translated into Northern German dialect.
Ooh,
And I'm like, whoa, I've never heard of that either. That would be fascinating to see it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I saw Evita in German when I was in Vienna once, and that was amazing. Even though I didn't speak German at the time, but yeah, that's cool. I'd love to hear that score.
Huh,
Mm.
very interesting.
Yeah, that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down of foreign language adaptations of some of these plays.
Yes.
Mary, did you hear about the whole, when I was doing research and looking up some articles when Carol Cook got the part, I saw all the hubbub about the Mary Martin, they were supposed to do it in Russia.
They were supposed to do it in Russia. Thank you for bringing that up, because she was the headliner on the international tour, first international tour. It was huge. She did it for like a year. And they were supposed to do it in Russia, and then because of the Cold War, things happened and they couldn't.
It was a big scandal. I mean, there were these great headlines. I wish I'd made copies of them, like Reds reject Mary. I mean, this crazy. And so as a result, President Johnson sent the whole company to Vietnam. Can you imagine? They did it for the troops.
11. They did 11 shows. I was actually, it's in my notes, because it's incredible when you think about it, that they sent somebody like Mary Martin, who was one of Broadway's biggest stars, with this huge cast into a war zone.
Yeah.
And they did 11 productions of the show. They were stripped down, and they just built stages and, the hangars, all around bases in Vietnam, and brought in all the troops to see the show. There again, you can see on YouTube, there's footage, and the soldiers just go berserk.
I'll have to ask my dad if he saw it. My dad saw Raquel Welch over in Vietnam.
Wow, but that was the usual thing, like, a singer or just some
Right, not a whole Broadway show.
a whole Broadway. I've never heard of it before. I would
No,
love to have been there for that.
Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. But something that I found really compelling about Mary Martin in Hello, Dolly is sort of her willingness to do things. First of all, her take on the role is really interesting, because, like I said, Pearl David kind of goes in and just sort of puts everybody on blast. With Mary Martin's take on the role, like she herself had so much natural charm. She was from Texas, and you believe that she's in this to help people. That yes, she makes money and a living doing this, but that's secondary. Like, this is something she's fallen into because she's just naturally going around helping people. And when she's at Harmonia Gardens, that's the name of the restaurant.
Harmonia, right.
When she's in the Harmonia Gardens and she's singing the Hello Dolly song, and she's like, hello Stanley, hello Louie, hello everybody. Like, you feel like she knows, she has the whole backstory of every single one of those guys in her head, and she's genuinely happy to see them again, and they're genuinely happy to see her. It's not just hello chorus boy, it's, but the cast that she talked about that too, that she as the star was in all the rehearsals with them, which is unusual, and worked as hard as they did, and even coached them on how to do their lines in better ways so that they would get a laugh. That she wasn't about being the big star. And when they took the show to Vietnam, privately she wasn't in favor of war, but she said, let's support the troops. Let's support these boys. And so she went and did it, and literally was willing to just put herself in harm's way because she felt like that was the right thing to do. Yeah.
So fascinating to me how every single person who played it, and we didn't talk about Ginger Rogers, who had a big, success with it, and all these people brought parts of their own personality or their own charisma to it, that it's really different. I'd love to hear like a psychologist analyze the different Dollies, because I can imagine Mary Martin's Dolly being very, very different.
Yeah, you can hear that recording. It's out there. It's on one of the whichever streaming service has it this week. But it's out there. It's the London cast.
It also is interesting to me that people like Mary Martin and even Ethel Merman, even though it was written for her, she didn't originate it, that their egos, allowed them to take up a role that wasn't theirs to begin with. I credit them for that. I mean, of course, they want it to work, and how many parts are there that are that great for people of a certain age? But I give them a lot of credit for, stepping in and just making their own interpretation.
Yeah, well, and I think that maybe the part of the turning it down and then taking it on is they didn't have anything left to prove at
Right.
that point in their careers. And so if they had something else going on, fine. You know, if they could be a little bit risk averse, you know, if the show didn't work, they haven't missed anything. If it does work, they can come in later, which they did.
And there are certain roles that they'll always be identified with. But speaking of Carol Channing's, you know, becoming suicidal when Barbara Streisand got the part, I mean, Mary Martin had plenty of her share of that too, even though, you know, forgive me if you're gonna hate me for this as well, but like, I'm sure she was amazing in The Sound of Music. Obviously, Julie Andrews was totally different, but thank the Lord she got that part, you know, it's just a different kind of thing. So, you know, you look at that and you think, like, I really do wish, obviously, Ethel Merman had been Mama Rose in the movie Gypsy, another one that I think they should redo. Love Rosalind Russell, but no.
That was Ethel. Yeah, well, I can't think of anybody but Mary Martin doing Peter Pan.
Correct.
Like, she
Yeah.
owned that role.
Yeah, that was a big deal in my childhood of that annual TV broadcast. Oh my God, how exciting. Yeah, it's interesting. The women who, yeah, come in and take on a role versus the ones that are their life's blood that are in them. And then the disappointment when it's immortalized by somebody else on film.
Yeah, exactly. What other questions do we have? We've just been jabbering and jabbering and jabbering.
Right? I'm
because,
kind of,
you know, like Dolly, we just talk. That's Karen Morrow. I read this on Richard's website. So Karen Morrow is absolutely fabulous
I love Karen Morrow.
performer, singer, and I've been really lucky that she's coached me on some of my performances. And I read a quote from her where she said that Dolly doesn't ever have conversations with anybody; she just talks. And it's true. It's true.
I've got a really good comment though, because I've kind of throughout this episode have been peeking at what people are saying. My TCM friend, Karen Burroughs Hansberry, said a really cool thing here. She said, the closest I ever came to seeing Pearl Bailey was when I was a little girl and my family visited New York. We went to see Hello, Dolly, but Bailey didn't perform that night. I think her stand-in was named Thelma Carpenter.
It was Thelma Carpenter.
According to my mom, at one point in the show, Carpenter directly addressed the audience, which was understandably disappointed not to see Bailey, held out her arms and said, God knows I'm trying. She got a rapid standing ovation.
Wow.
No, Thelma Carpenter was no slouch, though. She was fabulous.
That's a really cool story. Oh, Benjamin just said, here's the trailer of the German production. Okay, that
We'll watch
Oh, I like
rabbit
that.
hole is coming.
Yes.
That rabbit hole is coming. Barbara Boyd Doss said she saw Glenn Close on stage in Sunset Boulevard. It was phenomenal. Right, very cool. All right, people are certainly appreciating the discussion. So later on, Danny and Mary, if you guys want to chime in and converse with any people on
Absolutely.
the
Yeah, we'll
Facebook
go
page.
read the comments. We'll talk. We'll talk, people.
I hope none of the Barbara fans are hating me, but I mean, you know, we love Barbara Streisand.
That's Barbara Streisand. She was fun. No, I think you're right. She just wasn't. It wasn't yet the time
Right.
for her to take on that role, but she did a fantastic job.
I have to quickly tell my story about running into her once. I was shopping at the Vintage Fashion Expo in Santa Monica several years back, and I was in a booth looking at vintage scarves, and I'm thinking about what I want to get, and all of a sudden I hear this voice behind me go, excuse me, I'd like to see that scarf. And I didn't even turn around. I froze like a concrete statue. And every single hair on my entire body just stood straight up. And I was like, and it was Barbara Streisand coming
Whoa.
right up behind me asking for a scarf as well. And I was like,
Here, take it.
I now know why her concert tickets are thousands of dollars. When you hear that voice, you stop in your tracks, you know, and being like a few inches away from her, I was just like, oh no, oh my God, I'm just freaking
I would have
out.
cried. I would have just cried. I would have just instantly tears,
I didn't say anything
turning
to
around,
her.
hugging her very inappropriately.
I
It
couldn't
was
say
bad.
anything to her. I just dropped my hands and fled the scarf booth and went over to the corner and just melted down.
Wise decision.
I got the
I have
interview
no
her
idea.
once. It was very exciting. It was when she came out with the movie The Guilt Trip, and I got to interview her and Seth Rogen together, and that was intimidating but exciting, and she was very sweet. And then I saw her perform live once, with at the time was like the most I'd ever spent on a ticket in my life, and I didn't regret it one bit.
Absolutely. There's some people and some plays where you just think, I don't care how much it costs, I will carry this memory with me for like the rest of my life, and it has to be done, you know. And
I coming full circle back to my friend Carol Channing. I saw she did a concert at a church in Pasadena. I don't know exactly how all of this happened, but it was a concert to raise some funds to restore the roof. I actually have that ticket. I should have bought it. I have a ticket on my fridge, and it has been there like the entire time since I saw this concert. It's called Carol Channing Raises the Roof. And I drove from Orange County to Pasadena and back 3 times because of that concert, because I went to Orange County to get a friend who was visiting. We were at Disneyland, and then I drove both of us to Pasadena, which is close to where I live. Drove him back to Orange County, and then I went home, and I don't regret a second of that journey. It was
Worth it.
it was
some things in life are just worth it regardless. All right, well, we about wrapped up on Dolly
I
here.
think so. I need to eat more of these. I've been very
Yes.
polite here, having my little bites so that we can converse.
Someone come over and eat these.
Can you tell me how fast it takes Charles to consume that whole plate? Because I can say 30 minutes or under.
Oh,
Who else wants to
you
take a
got it.
bet on this one?
Definitely. He still has Barbara Stanwyck kipfuls on the sides of his mouth.
That was awesome.
Oh my goodness. And people who are watching at home, I think we've had a lot of fun doing this sort of Broadway Hollywood kitchen crossover. So if there's other topics in general you want to hear, let us know. But if there's specifically any sort of Broadway history things that you're interested in knowing more about, just put it in the comments. We'll give us your feedback, and we'll see what we can make happen.
Because I love television, I love theater, I love film. I mean, this started out as strictly classic Hollywood star stuff, but honestly, I'm open to everything, and as many recipes as there are out there. I figure I've got at least a decade or 2 of doing these episodes before I even
Easily.
scratch the surface. But
Easily.
it's fun to explore these entertainers of all different mediums who've given us all so much joy and happiness in our lives, and really brought such incredible artistry to our world.
Yes. We have to go figure out how to make some of Pearl Bailey's Let's Talk About Food recipes actually work as recipes. So
yes.
we're gonna sign off and do that.
All right. Well, Danny, thank you so much. Mary, thank you for
Thank
suggesting
you.
this whole
This was
idea.
fun.
This was so much fun. And stay tuned for more food, fun, and entertainment history from Hollywood Kitchen.
Bye.